We're talking about installing a rain garden, a residential rain garden tonight. We'll also be mentioning rain barrels at the very end briefly. So if you're interested in rain barrels, hang on to the end. And like Sean was saying, I'm a conservation coordinator and I've been here for a couple of years, and I'm excited that you're here and interested in learning about the value and benefits of rain harvesting at your home. And yeah, this is a follow-up to Eric's class last week. And if you missed that, then I think it might be on demand at some point, but I'll briefly cover a really basic intro, and then we'll get into the hands-on of installing a rain garden.
Yeah, Chris, I sent out a PDF of last week's presentation to everyone that signed up last week. But yeah, if people missed it, we should have it up on our YouTube channel soon. So,
Oh, good. So in tonight's class, we'll break down the process into manageable steps, from choosing a location to maintaining your garden once it's planted. Whether you're new to gardening or you have a lot of experience, the goal is to help you feel confident putting in a rain garden or a rain barrel at home. So let's briefly go over the why behind rain harvesting. And Eric's class explains this very nicely. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. When it rains in areas without roads, buildings, driveways, and sidewalks, the natural landscape captures most water. So about 50 to 60% of that water is able to soak into the ground, filtering pollution. And as it sinks into the ground, it becomes groundwater, and only about 10% runs off. However, in the developed environment, very little water can penetrate hard surfaces and compacted soils. So about 55% runs off, and we call that stormwater. So if you've ever seen water rushing down the gutter during or after a rainstorm, and you've thought, this is great, that water is going to the Great Salt Lake, for example, you're not wrong, but many people don't realize that stormwater is not treated, and it pours out of storm sewers directly into lakes, rivers, and streams, along with all the pollutants and toxins it picked up along the way. So you can see dirty stormwater heading down the watershed towards our streams, rivers, lakes. But what you can't see is groundwater slowly making its way to those same water bodies. So when the rainfall is allowed to sink into the soil, instead of being rushed down a concrete storm drain, it becomes groundwater. Groundwater filters naturally as it moves slowly through soil and rock layers. When we slow water down and allow it to infiltrate, it can help recharge the groundwater table. So over time, that groundwater feeds into the streams and rivers, and that's called base flow. Base flow is the steady year-round contribution to streams that comes from groundwater, from below ground, not from rain or snow melt above ground. This is why many creeks continue to flow long after a storm ends, while gutters and storm drains only have water in them if it's raining or just barely stopped raining. In healthy watersheds, aquifers slowly release groundwater into streams, supporting ecosystems and helping maintain flow to places like Great Salt Lake, even between storms. On the other hand, stormwater runoff collects pollutants and sends them quickly into gutters, storm drains, and streams, often without any treatment. So how are our local aquifers doing? Aquifers refill when water from precipitation, rivers, or lakes infiltrates through the soil and rock layers into underground storage zones. However, this process can take years, even decades, even millennia, especially in arid or semi-arid climates like the Salt Lake Valley. So while recharge technically occurs, it's too slow to keep pace with human use, pumping it out of the aquifers. Long-term trends around the Great Salt Lake indicate a steady decline in groundwater since 1952, and over 700 wells within 30 square miles of the Great Salt Lake have ceased flowing since 1954. And this is happening despite average or above average precipitation since the late 1960s. Stressors that can deplete aquifers include impervious paved surfaces that prevent rainwater from seeping in, like we were talking about on the last slide, climate change or changes in precipitation and snowmelt patterns, and withdrawal of groundwater for human uses. So we're withdrawing faster than nature can deposit. In the service area of Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, the human use demands on our water resources are only increasing, and to only name a couple, population growth, our population will double by 2050, and then our water use pattern, this chart on the bottom shows that during the winter months, our water use is the same, but during the irrigation season, we're using 60% of our drinking water between the months of May and October just on our landscapes. So while aquifer recharge is a process that unfolds over geological timescales, our individual actions can still make a meaningful impact on local water systems. Which brings us to rain gardening. Residential rain gardens, though modest in scale, contribute to this effort by reducing stormwater runoff. They capture rainwater that would otherwise flow over concrete and other impervious surfaces, picking up pollutants and overwhelming storm drains. So you can see in this picture from that car, anything on the driveway, oils and gasoline, if it goes into the storm drain, that storm drain is ending up in the lake, but it's dirty, polluted water. Rain gardens can help by enhancing soil infiltration. So by allowing water to percolate through the soil, rain gardens help maintain soil moisture and support plant health. And they help support base flow in streams. So over time, the water that infiltrates through rain gardens can contribute to that base flow, that steady flow of streams and rivers, sustaining ecosystems, even during dry periods. A well-designed rain garden can absorb 30% more runoff than a patch of lawn, making it a simple and beautiful way to help protect our water resources. While a single rain garden won't recharge an aquifer on its own, collectively, they play a role in creating conditions that support groundwater replenishment and combat desertification. In addition to all the broader ecosystem benefits that we've just talked about, a rain garden offers benefits for just your yard and just your neighborhood. Some examples: capturing rainwater helps reduce flooding. It can help prevent ponding and localized flooding. It prevents erosion and conserves soil. Improves drainage. It helps solve soggy yard spots or basement flooding caused by poor grading. It can help reduce ice hazards, eliminating standing water that can freeze and create dangerous winter conditions. Creates habitat. Any garden can attract birds, butterflies, and pollinators, helping to enhance urban biodiversity. Obviously boosts curb appeal. It adds natural beauty and value to your home with colorful, intentional design. And then, of course, saves water and money on what you would be spending irrigating your yard. And it helps manage stormwater on site without expensive underground infrastructure. So before we jump into the how-to of building a rain garden, let's go over the elements of a rain garden. A typical rain garden has three main components: an inlet, the basin, and an outlet. The inlet is where the rainwater runoff enters the garden, and you might have a pipe coming from a downspout from your gutter, or you might just have a swale or a dry riverbed, or you might just have a depression in your grass that guides the water to your rain garden. The basin is the bathtub, if you will, or the shallow depression that the water collects in. The basin floor is the finished depth of the rain garden, and this is where you plant your plants. On top of the finished depth or the basin floor is a layer of mulch. If it's raining and the basin is full of water, the depth of the water is called the ponding depth. When we talk about later in the class, when we talk about how deep to make the rain garden, we're talking about this ponding depth, and it is from the soil level, whether that's your native soil or amended soil, to the point of overflow. The outlet or overflow is the location where water is released when the rain garden cannot hold all of the runoff in a storm. And you'll want an outlet. No matter how large your rain garden is, it's important to know where the overflow of your garden is going. And lastly, if your soil is heavy clay or if it's compacted from construction, you may want to amend the soil beneath it. So now that we understand why rain gardens are important, the benefits, the elements, let's work through how to build one. If you've designed or planted a normal garden, a traditional garden before, it won't be difficult to design and build a rain garden. However, there are like a few specific design principles to follow when creating a garden. So we will cover choosing a location, determining the size of the garden, making a design plan, construction, irrigation, plants, and mulch, which is part of construction, but kind of is going to have their own section, and then maintenance. So let's start with choosing a location. In figuring out where to put our rain garden, we will make a base map and do a site analysis. We're going to locate utilities and property lines. We're going to find an area downhill from a water source. We'll make sure to keep the garden away from foundations and basements. We'll have to take slope into consideration, and we will plan for overflow. So let's start with a base map. We have a video on how to make a base map, so I won't go into detail here. I believe Sean might be able to put it in the chat. But your site plan or your base map should be to scale, and you'll want to include some important information like lot dimensions, property lines, permanent structures like your house and your patio, your driveway, a shed, the sidewalk, and existing trees and plants that you're not going to be removing in this process. You'll also want to make note of all utility lines on your property. So before you dig ever, you should call Blue Stakes. It's a free service to locate underground utility lines. And if you don't get the utility lines marked, and you damage something, you may be liable to pay for the repair. You also might be injured. So make sure, never assume you know where everything is. You might be surprised. Always call. They come out there really quick and keep you safe. So then now that we have a base map, you're going to observe and note conditions on your property. This is an important step as these conditions will affect the location of your garden. Some things you'll want to take note of: microclimates, slopes. You don't want to put a garden on a really steep slope. Relevant soil conditions like erosion and pooling. If there's like I said earlier, if there's a spot in your yard that's usually really soggy, it's an indication of poor infiltration, and you might not want to choose that spot. Sun exposure. Your rain garden should be in an area that's mostly sun to full sun. And then the last thing to note is your existing irrigation zones. We recommend watching Localscapes University to help you choose a functional spot for your rain garden. I'll talk more about Localscapes in a minute, but um, uh, your rain garden, you'll want to put on drip irrigation, and we'll be talking about that later as well. So you'll want to locate your rain garden in an area that isn't being hit by overhead spray. And so knowing your current irrigation design is going to be handy when you're choosing a location for your rain garden. Now that you've mapped your landscape's existing features, it's time to look at your landscape through a new lens, one focused on keeping rainwater on your property. So understand the watershed of your yard. Start at the top or the high point of your watershed and work your way down. The high point's most likely your roof. Observe your property during a rainstorm. Note where water flows, pools, or runs off your roof. Locate the downspouts and where that water goes once it hits the ground, and look for natural low spots or slopes. Your rain garden should be located downhill from a water source. It doesn't have to be the absolute lowest point of your yard, but the further down the watershed, the more effective your garden will be. As you begin to get an idea of how water flows over and off your property and where you might want to put your rain garden, check for these important parameters. You'll want to keep your rain garden at least 10 feet away from the house or from the foundation, 2 feet from fences that have wood footings, and a foot from fences with concrete footings. Don't choose a spot under a tree. You'll risk damaging the tree roots when you're digging the rain garden, and the extreme moisture could also harm the tree. Don't place the garden on top of a septic system if you have one, and avoid areas that stay consistently wet, as this may indicate poor drainage. I would also like to point out, notice in this picture that the rain garden is downhill from on the property and a safe distance from foundations and trees. However, this rain garden is surrounded by what we call non-functional turf. So this property is located in the Midwest, and they may not even have an irrigation system to keep that lawn alive. In Utah, irrigation is required for lawn and planting beds for those plants to survive. We don't recommend locating a rain garden in the middle of turf grass due to irrigation needs here. All right, let's keep narrowing down our options. Avoid steep slopes unless you're prepared to build a retaining wall. If you do build a retaining wall, anything over 2 feet needs to be engineered, especially if it's going to be holding water behind it. So avoiding slopes greater than 12% is what you're going to be wanting to look at doing. If you're not sure how to calculate the slope of your yard, pound a stake in an uphill end and another stake at the downhill end. The stakes should be 12 to 15 feet apart, and make sure that the downhill stake is tall enough so that when you extend a string between the two stakes, it's able to be connected to the uphill stake. Using a string level or a carpenter's level that string and measure the width between the two stakes, and then measure the height in inches on the downhill stake between the ground and the string. Divide the height by the width and multiply the results by 100 to find the lawn's percent slope. The last step is to plan for overflow. Make sure you plan where overflow runoff will go, and make sure that you know your yard's watershed. So you just want to ensure that this water isn't heading toward a building, a foundation, your neighbor's yard. Never put a rain garden where it could flood your basement or a neighbor. When planning for overflow near a window well, the outlet to the garden must be 6 inches below the elevation of the window well. So the first photo shows a level yard. The overflow could easily go backwards into the window well. Just make sure that the outlet of your garden is 6 inches below the window well elevation. So as an example of finding where to put a rain garden, here's an example of a traditional Utah landscape. It is mainly lawn, and it has a mounded kidney bean planting bed in the middle of it, and narrow planting bed at the house's foundation. When it rains, you can see pooling at the front, the right, and left of the house. All this pooling happens within 10 feet of the foundation, resulting in flooding in the basement, icy driveways and sidewalks in winter, and wet spots in the yard. The majority of water ends up as runoff and leaves the property. The planting bed mound to the left of the front yard, because it is mounded up, it's actually diverting water away rather than in and towards the roots of the plants. So nothing about this landscape considers stormwater, and the downspout placement was an afterthought. On top of that, nothing about the landscape is water-wise, and all of the grass is watered with overhead spray irrigation and all of the planting beds as well. Localscapes, like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if anybody has heard of localscapes. It's the gold standard of water efficient landscapes design tailored for Utah. So let's take a closer look at this localscape and consider how to incorporate water rain harvesting. So this example features a small central open shape of lawn with water efficient planting beds dominating the rest of the landscape. But despite the improvements in design, there's still stormwater issues. So how can we make this design even more water efficient by harvesting rainwater? Let's look at the right side of the house. Pooling occurs on a primary path that gets used during the winter, resulting in an icy sidewalk, and much of the water is lost down the driveway. By extending the rain garden drain under the sidewalk, digging a shallow basin, and planting it with drought-tolerant perennials, they have achieved a dry sidewalk and reduced their irrigation needs. As a reminder, so long as you know where the overflow is going and it doesn't cause flooding or safety issues, just build an upside-down planting mound and you will be making a difference. A rain garden isn't much different than a regular planting bed. It's just slightly shallow basin to allow the collection of water. Now that you've chosen a location, let's figure out how big your rain garden should be. To determine the size, we need the following information: the surface area draining to the garden and a basic understanding of your soil type. So your roof is most likely the largest impervious surface on your property. So we recommend starting here. Most homes have multiple downspouts, typically one per 20 to 40 feet of gutter. So step one would be to find the portion of your roof draining to the downspout that will feed your rain garden. So you don't need your entire roof's area, only the areas draining to a downspout that will feed your rain garden. And you will want to find that area. You can do this by measuring the footprint of the roof on the ground or by aerial imagery. The slope or pitch of the roof doesn't change the amount of rain it collects because rain falls straight down. So whether your roof is steep or flat, the total catchment area is the same as the roof's footprint. To find the area in square feet, measure the length times the width. In this example, it shows that A multiplied by side B will give you the surface area in feet squared. Step 3, look for and add in the measurements of other impervious surfaces, such as other roofs, other portions of your roof, a patio, driveways that may drain to your garden. In this photo, we see that 2 downspouts and a patio are all draining toward the spot where the rain garden is to be located. So find the area of each portion and then add them all together. The easiest way will probably be something like Google Maps. Pull up your address, left click, select measure distance, and then you can move the dots around to find areas as needed. In this example, 2 areas of the roof are draining to 1 downspout, and 1 part of the driveway they're all leading to the area that's going to be the rain garden. Once you've calculated the area of all the surfaces that drain to your garden, add them all together. The area draining to our rain garden is 960 square feet. Now, depending on your soil type, your rain garden size will be a percentage of the total impervious surfaces draining to it. We'll come back to finish that example, but let's take a detour to talk about soil type. In this picture, you can see how water behaves in different types of soil. Clay soil has very small particles, making it dense and slow to absorb. Water tends to spread out horizontally before it is able to seep down. Loam is a balanced mix of sand, silt, and clay, and it holds water well, but also drains efficiently. Water soaks in steadily and spreads evenly, making it ideal for plant roots and healthy infiltration. And then sand has really large particles, so there's a lot of space in between them, and that causes water to drain quickly and flow straight down. So in general, if you live in the Salt Lake Valley, you'll most likely have clay soil in the valley, and as you approach the benches, you'll find more sandy soil. If you're not sure what type of soil you have, there are a few options for determining your type. The easiest test is the ribbon method. Take a handful of soil from your garden and get it wet, and just gently squeeze it between your thumb and forefinger, and it'll begin forming a ribbon. Well, if it's clay soil, it'll begin forming a ribbon. If it's sandy, it won't hold a ribbon at all, and it will crumble easily. If your soil can form a ribbon longer than 1.5 to 2 inches before that ribbon breaks off, then most likely your soil is 30% clay or more, and it's not suitable for a rain garden without amending your soil, and we'll get to that. You can also send a sample of your soil to USU, and they'll tell you a lot of information about your soil. For building a rain garden, generally knowing what type it is through the ribbon test is pretty good. One more test that you'll want to perform is a percolation test. A percolation test gives us a percolation rate, or in other words, it lets us know how quickly water drains into the soil. This is important because we do not want to be installing ponds in our yard that harbor mosquitoes. We want to be installing a rain garden. And by definition, a rain garden will drain fully within 24 hours. So at a rate of about 1 inch per hour. So you've chosen your location for the garden. In the center of that, of your future garden, you're going to dig a hole that's maybe 8 inches by 8 inches. Try and keep the sides straight or vertical as possible. And you're going to saturate the soil. So you'll fill that hole and let it drain completely. And once it's drained completely, you'll fill it again. Refill the hole to a known depth, use a measuring stick to mark the initial water level, and then regularly remeasure as the water level drops, typically every hour, or if you have sandy soil and it's draining quickly, every 15 to 30 minutes. And then calculate the percolation rate. So the rate is typically expressed as inches of water per hour. So for example, if the water level drops 2 inches in an hour, the percolation rate is 2 inches per hour. Ideal drainage is about 2 inches per hour. If the rate is less than an inch per hour, the drainage is too slow, and you'll need to amend your soil. If the rate is more than 4 inches per hour, you also might want to amend your soil just because it's not holding water at all. But definitely recommend amending soil in clay, and if you're dealing with construction, compaction. So in clay soil, a rain garden would need to be wide and shallow to absorb the water, just like that picture. So it's recommended that the area of the rain garden is 30 to 60% of the area of the impervious surface draining into it. And then it's recommended that the depth is 3 to 4 inches. In sandy soil, because the pattern that we see there, the water is able to infiltrate quickly. The area of your rain garden only needs to be 10 to 20% of the surface area draining into it, and it can be 4 to 8 inches deep. And then in loam, or if you are amending your soil, which we recommend, generally you're safe at 20% and 6 inches deep. Soil amendments are not generally recommended for just a typical planting bed in our region. Native and climate adapted plants are well suited to the existing soil conditions and will establish best without added compost or fertilizers. However, rain gardens are an exception because they're designed to manage and infiltrate stormwater. We recommend amending the soil within the rain garden area, but not elsewhere in your landscape. The amended soil improves drainage and creates conditions that allow water to soak in effectively. So let's talk more about how to amend your soil in just a minute, but let's wrap up our example house. So to determine the garden size, we need to know the drainage surface area and our soil type. So the combined area of impervious surfaces draining into our garden was 960 square feet. Let's assume the soil was heavy clay and that we amended it with sand, compost, and topsoil, bringing it closer to a loam type soil. So in that case, our garden soil type is loam. It's amended. And that would mean that it's recommended that our rain garden is 20% of the drainage area and 6 inches deep. So our garden area was 960 square feet. 20% of that is about 200 square feet. So our garden size is about 200 square feet with a recommended depth of 6 inches deep. But just as a reminder, the size of your rain garden doesn't only depend on surface area drainage and soil type. It also depends on how much money you want to spend, how much room you have in your yard, how much runoff you want to control. You can reduce the size of your rain garden by as much as 30% and still control almost 90% of the runoff. Any size rain garden will help slow the flow of water off your property and help water stays where it falls. So even a small rain garden will be beneficial. All right, it's time to revisit our base map. We've chosen the location and we know the size of our garden. Let's make sure we have a plan and a rough understanding of what we need to have on hand before breaking ground. So we're going to talk about amending soil, materials and tools, and having a design plan. To determine how much soil we're digging out and replacing, let's review garden depth. As a reminder, when we talk about depth of a rain garden, we are talking about the ponding depth. Ponding depth is the depth that water can pool before it flows out of the rain garden. It's measured from the lowest point of the rain garden surface to the elevation of the outlet. So that is from the finished depth or the soil to the outlet, and the soil could be native soil or it could be amended soil. That's our rain garden depth. The amended soil should be a blend, if you are amending, the amended soil should be a blend of 50% sand, 25% compost, and 25% topsoil. If you removed good topsoil while digging out the ponding depth, set it aside and then reuse that topsoil in this rain garden mix, in this amended soil mix. And then the mulch layer sits on top of the soil, whether the soil is native or amended, and it is just engulfed by the ponding depth. So we'll talk about mulch later, but it doesn't change the depth of the rain garden. You'll want to know how to calculate a cubic yard, just because that's the standard in getting materials like soil, topsoil, mulch, compost, things like that. Bags at the store are usually 1 to 2 cubic feet. A cubic yard is one of those bags that you see dropped off on people's driveways sometimes. And to calculate a cubic yard, you'll do length times width times depth. And then that would give you in feet. So length times width times depth in feet. That would give you cubic feet. And then divide that calculation by 27. And that will give you cubic yards. So let's calculate the cubic yards of excavated soil coming out, amended soil going in, and mulch going on top. So the average residential rain garden size in the US is 100 to 300 or 400 square feet. So the previous home we used as an example, where our recommended rain garden size was 196 square feet, about 200 square feet, is kind of right in the middle. So we're just going to keep going off of that. That's about 14 feet by 14 feet. And that feels really large to me, but whatever numbers we come up with in this example, remember that even a small rain garden has benefits. So if we went with a small rain garden that was 7 feet by 7 feet, your material needs would be half as much as what we're about to calculate. So if we dig down 12 inches or 1 foot in a 200 square foot rain garden, we're removing about 7.4 cubic yards of dirt. Some of that can be reused as a berm, and if your topsoil is healthy, you can reuse some of that. So you won't necessarily have to haul all of that away, but that's how much we would be digging. So we dig down about 12 inches and 6 inches for our rain garden depth. So this photo is showing 4 inches of mulch plus 2 inches of depression is the 6 inches our finished rain garden depth. We needed to amend the soil, so 6 inches under that is where we're amending soil. So to dig out all of that is the 7.4 cubic yards. We are then going to backfill our with amended soil to the finished rain garden depth. So we're backfilling 6 inches of amended soil. And that's going to be about 3.7 cubic yards of amended soil that we're bringing in. Again, if you're reusing some of your own topsoil, it'll be less, but that's will be the general need to fill in a hole that big. And then lastly, we need about 4 inches of mulch, or 1/3 of a foot of mulch to cover the soil. And that is about, is this not clicking? There we go. 2.4 cubic yards of mulch. So that's moving a rough total of about 13.5 cubic yards of materials. A standard pickup truck can hold 2.5 to 3 cubic yards, so that's about 5 trips with a pickup truck. It could be less if you're reusing topsoil and using dirt as a berm, but be aware that there will be quite a bit of material management. Supplies for building a rain garden are varied, but it depends if you're doing it all yourself, if you're bringing in machinery. But in general, you'll want a shovel, you may need a pickaxe, you may want a large tarp to put on your lawn. If you have good topsoil to keep, you'll want to protect your lawn. You'll need a wheelbarrow, a level, and probably amended soil, mulch, and then we'll talk about plants later, and then you might need PVC pipe for extending your gutter if that's what you choose to do. So lastly, let's consider plant coverage for our rain garden. Choosing native or drought adapted plants reduce long-term water needs, and in most parts of Utah, soils in rain gardens aren't consistently saturated, so you don't need a special kind of plant for your rain garden. Nearly any perennial will perform well. So while the deep roots of many native species are beneficial, it shouldn't limit your plant selection. Select perennial plants that you like and that complement your surrounding landscape. Find the mature size of the plant on your on the plant tag and sketch out on your to scale base map. Sketch out circles that represent those plants with the correct diameter or spread so that you can see how many plants will fit in your rain garden area. This Pete Udolph is a famous landscape designer. This photo, this is what some of his designs look like. You don't have to be an artist to develop a great design, but don't be so concerned with the way that the design looks on paper that you forget you're planning for real three-dimensional items. All right, we've called blue stakes. We have our plan. It is time to dig. We're going to remove the grass or whatever ground cover is there, level the bed, dig out the basin, create a berm and an outlet, mix in organic material, and track or connect the water source. Remove existing ground cover. If the ground cover is currently lawn, you could use a sod cutter. Oh, okay. You could use a sod cutter or a shovel and actually remove the grass. This gives you the opportunity to use the sod elsewhere in your landscape if you need to. Alternatively, you can kill the lawn chemically or by solarization instead of removing it. This might be a good option if your soil, if your topsoil is really healthy. This method allows you to keep some of that instead of removing it with the sod, and set that topsoil aside and till it into your amended soil instead of needing to purchase topsoil. If there's any slope to your garden, begin leveling the bed. Use excavated soil from the high ground to build up the downhill and perimeter berms. Use a line level to ensure the basin is flat. You want to make sure that it's flat so that the water is able to infiltrate and not pool in one area more than another. Once the bed is level, dig to the bottom of your rain garden's inlet. If you're using a PVC pipe routed from your gutter, dig to the bottom of that pipe, and this will be your starting point. From the bottom of the inlet, dig to the finished depth or the ponding depth of your garden. Remember, ponding depth is about 3 to 4 inches deep for clay soil, 6 inches deep for loam or an amended soil, and it can be 6 to 8 inches for sandy soil. If your soil needs amending, dig another 6 inches or so. If your percolation test drained at a rate of at least 2 inches per hour, you won't need to amend your soil. But if your percolation test did not drain in 24 hours because you've got heavy clay or really compacted soil from construction, you'll want to dig another 4 to 6 inches of soil and make room for a rain garden mix or amended soil to improve your rain garden's infiltration rate. So we have now dug as deep as we need to go. We've removed the ground cover and dug to the bottom of the inlet. Then we dug to our finished rain garden depth. And if your soil does not need to be amended, you're done at this step. If our soil needs amending, excavate another 4 to 6 inches. So now we've dug as deep as we need to go. It's time to start building back up and adding in our amended soil. The amended soil only goes to our finished rain garden depth. So begin filling the hole with sand. Again, 50% sand, 25% topsoil, 25% compost, or a pre-made rain garden mix, and continue to backfill it to the finished depth, making sure not to compact the soil as you do so. If you're planning to connect your gutter to the rain garden, it's a good idea to install the drainage pipe last so that the project isn't inundated with water after a rainstorm while it's still under construction. So the pipe, if you're using a pipe, it has to be at a slope of 2%. And if you don't have a pipe, a swale can be used, like this picture on the left. Okay. Dig a trench for a pipe that will carry water from one or more gutter downspouts to the rain garden. So first you'll peel up the topsoil or the grass, roll it up, gently set it aside. When you're done, you can put that grass back. And then line the trench with stones to prevent erosion. Next, you'll install the PVC piping. Make sure the pipe has a positive slope for its entire length and that the spillway of your rain garden is at least 12 inches in elevation below the ground surface at your foundation so that the water doesn't back up to the house during rain events. So use a level to make sure that there's at least the 1/4 inch per foot of pipe run. The slope keeps the pipe from collecting soil and debris and clogging, and this will help prevent the water from shooting out of the connection between the downspout leader and your drainage pipe. If you want, you can install a pop-up emitter at least 10 feet away from your house foundation to allow any backed up water to safely drain out of the pipe. The emitter acts as a relief valve to allow water to discharge without getting to your foundation or your basement. And then extend the piping into the rain garden basin by approximately 1 foot. When the piping is in place, fill in the trench with soil and replace the grass if you're going through grass. And then make sure that your garden has an outlet. And at the end of that pipe, put a large flat stone or rocks to slow that water as it enters the rain garden to help prevent eroding the entrance there. All right, by this point in the project, you've done the hardest work. So let's talk about something a little more fun and exciting, the plants. We've already talked briefly about drip irrigation, plants, and mulch, but let's cover them a little more in depth. Yes, drip irrigation, plants, and mulch. Our rain garden is dug to the finished depth. This is the level at which we install drip irrigation. In Utah's arid climate, rain gardens benefit from drip irrigation to help plants establish and to survive during extended dry periods. With high evaporation and intense summer sun, supplemental irrigation is strongly recommended even for stormwater capture features. Drip systems apply water slowly and directly to roots, minimizing waste and encouraging deep root growth. These roots also improve infiltration of the soil by creating channels that move water below the surface and into our shallow aquifers. Use inline emitter tubing or point source emitters placed near each plant and cover the tubing with the mulch to reduce evaporation. If possible, put the rain garden on its own irrigation valve. This allows for deep, infrequent watering that mimics natural soaking rains and can be adjusted seasonally. Once plants are established and benefiting from storm runoff, irrigation can often be shut off, but even native plants during a drought are going to need that supplemental irrigation. Densely planted rain gardens are barely distinguishable from a regular garden. If you've planted plants in your yard, it's not different for a rain garden. Place plants in pots on the bed according to your design. Gently remove plants from pots and break up the roots. Dig each hole twice as wide as the plant plug and plant. The crown of the plant should be level with the ground. And again, in this case, the ground is the soil level, the finished rain garden depth, whether that's your native soil or the amended soil. So make sure you're using hardy perennial species with well-established root systems that won't require frequent pruning. But most importantly, make the plant palette your own. Filter by bloom or foliage color, height, sun requirements, salt tolerant plants for the park strip if you're putting a rain garden in a park strip. And if you have deer, you can find plants that are deer resistant. We recommend going to the Conservation Garden Park website. All the plants listed within the database are plants that have survived well here in the garden at Conservation Garden Park. And then the database includes information about each of the plants so that you can find what fits your garden, your light requirements, your mature size, your bloom color, and it also has a picture of what the plant looks like throughout every season. Once your plants are in the ground, the next step is to add your mulch. Mulch is just a material that covers the soil. So it can be organic, like bark chips or compost, or it can be inorganic, like chat, gravel, or river rocks. The sun is getting in my face. Mulch helps with water retention and helps keep weed seeds from germinating. If you're installing a rain garden in your park strip, be sure to check with your city's rules for mulch. Some places only allow certain kinds of mulch in the park strip because of stormwater management. You'll notice that we did not recommend weed fabric anywhere in the construction of our garden. We don't actually recommend weed fabric in any garden, but especially not in a rain garden where infiltration is the #1 priority. Do not put weed fabric in your garden, in your rain garden. All right, let's quickly recap everything we covered in construction. Remove the ground cover, dig to the bottom of the inlet, and level the bed. Dig to the finished depth or ponding depth, depending on your soil type. If you need soil amendments, dig another 6 inches. Fill with amended soil to the finished depth. At this level, you add drip irrigation and plants. And on top of that, you add 3 to 4 inches of mulch. The ponding depth engulfs that mulch layer. The ponding depth and depth of your rain garden is from the soil to your outlet, and make sure to add an outlet. And then as a reminder, do not let installing a rain garden create areas of non-functional lawn in your landscape. The photo on the left is the finished garden of the example construction photos that we've been viewing for the last few slides. But you don't want your rain garden being hit by overhead spray, and changing your irrigation system to ensure that would be very difficult and perhaps inefficient. The photo on the right is a slightly better option. We encourage applying localscape design concepts to your landscape, which includes having lawn in a designed central open shape for irrigation and maintenance efficiency, not to mention beauty and function. If you want to learn more about the localscapes design concept, or you need more resources or help with design, check out localscapes.com. And then here at the garden, we also have classes that we teach in person, virtually like this, or have pre-recorded. So speaking of ease of maintenance and localscapes, let's get into maintenance just a little bit. See if I can get out of the sun, sorry. Rain gardens are maintained similar to any regular planting bed. It's important to weed, clean up, and remulch the garden periodically, but for a rain garden, especially after heavy rain. So regular maintenance is required to keep your rain garden looking good and functioning well. So be sure to include this maintenance in your plan and your budget. All gardens need consistent weeding and replenishing of mulch. As the garden matures, weeds will be pushed out by the growing plants, and you'll periodically need to prune dead vegetation and plants that are getting too big. And you'll want to rake mulch periodically and replenish it yearly. If you find that the inlet of your rain garden is depositing sediments and debris, you'll want to just keep an eye on that area and clean it up as needed. Monitor the garden and make adjustments. New plants need extra water to get established, even in a rain garden, and they can't go long periods without water. So you'll want to hand water all your new plants on top of the drip schedule. Unfortunately, water-wise plants are not instantly water-wise. They require frequent water while they're establishing their root system. So you'll want to water every other day for the first 2 weeks after planting, especially if you're trying to establish plants in the heat of the summer. After the first couple seasons, you can scale back watering to a couple times per year. Once your plants are established and grown up, you'll move into a more typical watering schedule. These plants should be watered deeply and infrequently. This is why drip run times are long but spread apart. You want the water to really get down into the soil. So for clay soil, you'll run the drip irrigation for 60 minutes once a week. For sandy soil, run the drip irrigation for 30 minutes twice a week. Not transitioning plants into a regular watering schedule is a common maintenance mistake. So be sure to set yourself a reminder to change the irrigation schedule once the plants are established. After all of your hard work, don't forget to enjoy your amazing new rain garden. So I don't know if now is a good time to stop for questions, but we're gonna wrap up with rain barrels after or next, I guess.
Let's see here. We've had a few questions that have come through. Maybe we can go through just a few of those, Chris, and then we can go on to rain barrels. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Okay. Does the slope on the sides of the rain garden not matter, or is that too specific? Question mark.
The sides of a rain garden are sloped in, but there isn't a magic number for that slope, so long as the basin is flat.
Okay, sounds good. Um, there's a couple questions about like what to do with the extra soil. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. So like soil that you dug out for the rain garden. Any thoughts there on what to do with that?
Yeah, um, you'll want a berm around the entire rain garden. So a lot of that soil can be used in building up that berm and like becoming an architect of where that water goes, making sure that the berms are all high enough so that you get to create an outlet and you have control over where that water goes. Um, if you have other places in your yard where you need that soil, or if you have low spots in your yard that you need to build up, then that's something you could use. Otherwise, you might just have to haul it off or put it on KSL.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about is if you're doing like a bigger project and a rain garden is just part of it, and let's say you want a vegetable garden and raised boxes, maybe you could put that soil in the raised boxes, maybe with more compost mixed in the boxes. But that's one way. Or just think about other things in your yard where you could put it. But yeah, berms, things like that are good. Let's
Just to
see.
add to the slope question,
Yeah, yeah.
there's no magic number, but you don't really want to go beyond 12% just because of erosion from the sides. So a gradual slope is good.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably good for now. Let's keep going, Christina, and then we'll take some more questions at the end.
All right, we've just got a few more slides on rain barrels. So if building a rain garden isn't something you're ready to take on, installing a rain barrel is a great place to begin your rain harvesting journey, or even if you're doing both. It's the cheapest, simplest way to harvest rain without making structural changes to your landscape. Barrels are installed below the downspouts of a rooftop guttering system, and water's then funneled or directed into the tanks. Quite a few options exist depending on your roof size, how much water you want to capture, and how much you want to spend on the project. You can create a perfect system for your needs. So consider a downspout that gathers water from a smaller surface area of your home or garage. Narrow side yards, downspouts near a patio or a hardscaped area are good options. It's a good idea to place a rain barrel near the plants you will water, such as potted plants or a vegetable garden. Are rain barrels legal in Utah? Yes, they are, with the following qualifiers. Collection in more than 2 containers or greater than 100 gallons must be registered. Collection and use are limited to the same parcel of land on which the water is captured and stored. And there's no cost for registering. To register your rain barrel, you can go to www.waterrights.utah.gov to get more information on that. And then Eric, no more than 2,500 gallons total. Is that still the case? Do you know?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. It became legal to harvest rainwater on May 11th, 2010, in case anyone's interested. Essential components of a rain barrel include the inlet, which will typically be a gutter downspout, a screen, which keeps debris from entering the rain barrel, and most importantly, keeps mosquitoes from breeding in it, and a spigot. So putting and then an overflow mechanism. So putting in place an overflow mechanism is also always a good idea. The overflow can be connected to another rain barrel, a drip system, or other stormwater catchment systems. So in addition to that overflow mechanism, this is one of the earlier photos. It's also a good idea to have a diverter. So this connects to the downspout. So when the barrel is full, rain can be directed to continue down the downspout instead of going into the rain barrel. And you can have that downspout go to a rain garden if you wanted. And then it's also a good idea to have that diverter so that in the winter time you're not collecting snow melt that then freezes and thaws and freezes inside the rain barrel, maybe causing damage. A rain barrel can be an eye-catching design feature, or it can be camouflaged as a planter. They can also be painted and decorated to reflect your sense of style, or be a simple, cheap, utilitarian design like the DIY trash can method. There is a range of prices and design features available in rain barrels, and there are also a couple of local rain barrel incentives. So just check that before you pursue getting a rain barrel. You might be in an area eligible for some sort of rain barrel incentive. So another example, let's start with the smallest, simplest rain harvesting intervention. Consider a downspout that gathers water from a smaller surface area of your home or garage. Because rain barrels capture a relatively small amount of water, you don't want to choose an area with a large surface area of drainage, like your entire roof. If you have a smaller area, that's more realistic to how much water the barrel can hold in relation to how much water falls during a rainstorm in Utah. So what is the proximity to the plants you will be watering? Locating a rain barrel near potted plants or a vegetable garden for supplemental watering is an excellent option. In this example, they added a rain barrel that provides supplemental water for the potted plants on the back patio and eliminated pooling near the foundation of the house. If you want more resources, visit our YouTube channel. There are all kinds of landscaping videos here, planting, maintenance, irrigation, and you're also welcome to come to the Conservation Garden Park. It's an excellent resource for seeing how plants look in the landscape. Please reach out if you have any follow-up questions about rain gardening. You can email us at Conservation Programs, or that is my email there, and I'd be happy to hear from you.
When you make an outflow on a park strip, do cities allow us to grind the lowest point of the park strip curb? That's a great question. I've looked into this a little bit. Rain gardens aren't really common here yet. There are cities across the Midwest and the Pacific Northwest that do allow it or require it. But I don't know. You'd have to reach out to your individual city. I don't know, Christina or Sean, if you've looked into that more.
I haven't. Chris, have you looked into that at all?
No, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. So I think what we're hoping for is eventually installations will happen in new neighborhoods that are like that.
Mhm.
And hopefully that's the case going forward in the future. Like with park strips in the past, and well, even right now, there's sometimes a park strips installed and lawn is just put in it, and we've made some good transitions to just having water-wise park strips installed as new neighborhoods get put in. But maybe the next step is you don't have any lawn, you've got a water-wise park strip with water-wise plants, but also the park strip allows stormwater to come in. I think from the city's perspective, hopefully those sort of things happen over time. Right now, when they're building new neighborhoods, they're usually having to take one lot in that new neighborhood, at least one lot, and make it a stormwater retention basin or detention basin. And they're having to take up at least one lot to do that. But if they could manage that in the park strips along the roadside, that could be a solution. And we're looking to expand the conservation garden over the next 5 years. And one of the first things that we're going to install is new landscaping along 1300 West, which runs in front of the garden. And we plan on doing that in our park strip. We'll allow water to come into the park strip through curb cuts into the rain gardens that are along the road that we'll have along the landscape along the road out there. So that'll be pretty fun installation. Hopefully it'll inspire others, other cities and things like that to do that. But we're excited for that. Would you use the same construction principles in building a swale?
That's
Thoughts
go
there?
ahead, Sean, if you want. But
No, yeah, either of you. That's fine.
so, I talked about this a little bit in the class a week ago, but the definition between a swale and a rain garden or a bioswale is kind of loose. So a swale is used for conveyance, but some swales are built to slow down water with plants planted into them to achieve some of the aspects of what you would with the endpoint with the rain garden. So if the goal is to move water away from the foundation of a house, you don't really want to infiltrate water there. So moving it from a downspout through, like a dry riverbed, most of the year dry, to channel that water into a rain garden. In that case, you wouldn't use the exact same principles. You might just use the compacted native soil to kind of to convey that water. But you can play around with it, and if you have a space where you're moving water, away from a foundation, you can start creating some meander and adding plants into that swale, or amending the soil to achieve some of the aspects that you could from a rain garden.
Cool. Christina, in running the conservation programs and the landscape incentive program, have you seen anyone include a rain garden as part of their project when removing lawn, I should say?
I've seen a few rain barrels,
Okay.
and I think I've seen a few swales, like Eric was saying, whatever the definition exactly is of that, but like a dry riverbed. Um, but having seen a rain garden doesn't come to mind. I'd love
Yeah.
to see more of them, that's for sure.
Yeah. Because yeah, this could be a good option. So think about your landscape at home, and think about so if you're interested in participating in the landscape incentive program, maybe you've got a side yard, or maybe you've got lawn on the side of your driveway, and you don't really use the lawn for anything. But there's a downspout going to that area. Maybe that's a spot where you could remove some lawn, put in some water-wise plants, put in a rain garden. So yeah, be thinking about those things if you'd like to participate in the landscape incentive program as a way to add maybe rain garden as part of that project too.
I'll also add that we're actively working on adding a rain garden incentive to the landscape incentive program, and we're hoping to have that in the next few years. So if you're planning on doing a project in the next few years, that we might be offering some additional funding for putting one in.